and mechanics like spawns don't work, it's not gonna be fun. So that, my friends, is why I'm done pre-ordering COD.
I'm sorry, deplorable, horrible, garbage!
When was the last time you played COD? Was it BO2 trying to get to the highest round on zombies? Was it the multiplayer that got you playing, grinding for prestige? Or was it the original Modern Warfare 2 trying to be the best trick shotter that you can be? We all started somewhere in one point, our very first Call of Duty game. But also, Call of Duty had an origin point as well. The year was 2002, and it's been 2 years since the 2000 millennium time period. Of course, everything was vastly different back then, especially the gaming space. That one huge title that was popular at the time was Halo Combat Evolved, a shooter that changed first-person shooters to migrate over to consoles. This was thanks to Microsoft reaching over to the Bungie team to make a flagship title for the new Xbox console that came out a year before 2002. And Microsoft found new success with their new console, which sold around 24 million units. Soon, the console had a system that allowed players to play online named Xbox Live, a subscription service that allows you to play multiplayer games depending on how long your subscription was. The generational consoles at the time were the original Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and Nintendo systems being the GameCube and Dreamcast. These were known as the 6th generation consoles. A lot of people would tell you that these lineups of consoles were the best of all time, with iconic games such as Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, and many more. Another thing that happened was that a new game was released, and it was Battlefield 1942. Around this time, World War II shooters were pretty new in the gaming genre. Usually it was in movies, but now developers have decided to make players experience war in video games to make them feel like they were in the wars themselves. BF 1942 had a campaign mode which allowed players to play the story of World War II. It also had a second mode called Conquest, where players played a large-scale PvP game mode with a system called reinforcement tickets. And you can use these tickets to either make the enemy team have 0 tickets to win, or the team with the most tickets would win. The game had the usual PvP modes as well, which are Team Deathmatch and Capture the Flag, and these games are self-explanatory. With all of these modes, Battlefield 1942 was successful as the first Battlefield game sold 3 million copies, but soon a competitor has risen.
Got some German infantry in front here. Whee! Oh my god, they fired a rocket and missed.
A new video game studio called Infinity Ward was created by Grant, Jason, and Vince. These people used to be in a studio called 2015 Games LLC, a game studio that created Medal of Honor Allied Assault for Electronic Arts, and the game was a hit. But Jason and the other two decided that they were dissatisfied with the contract they had under EA and wanted to engage with another publisher at the time, Activision. And they decided to help create Infinity Ward. Since Activision is working with their new studio, they wanted to create a new FPS franchise, and this was the birth of Call of Duty, with the first title being of course a World War II shooter to compete with Battlefield 1942. And the game had a campaign where players play a story within the game as a soldier in World War II. And this is also the beginning of the Linear campaign which we know of today, where the player plays multiple different missions in a certain way and do story objectives to advance in the missions. The game also had a multiplayer as well, with modes such as Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Search and Destroy, and one of the new modes were behind enemy lines, where the player has to take out as many enemy soldiers as possible before being overrun. It's basically like elimination, and Headquarters is essentially a hardpoint-like mode, I think so, and Retrieval is similar to modern Search and Destroy. The game was released for Windows, Mac OS X, and the N-Gage, which was Nokia's video game handheld device. With all of this, Activision Infinity Ward was successful in selling around 790,000 copies but earned $29.6 million at the time. The game even won the Shooter of the Year award and was nominated the best game in the 2004 Game Developers Choice Awards. This game was a hit, but there was more innovation to be added. Shortly after the success of Call of Duty 1, Activision won the Infinity Ward to make a sequel to Call of Duty 1. And not only that, but Microsoft wants a Call of Duty title for the new Xbox 360 system. So then Microsoft contacted Activision to publish Call of Duty 2. Work has begun, with Infinity Ward making the sequel better than its predecessor. This title was planned to be released in the last quarter of 2005. To note, this was going to be the first Call of Duty title to release on PCs and consoles, essentially making Infinity Ward a PC/console developer studio. And they were also improving their own personal engine called the IW engine. They wanted to up the graphics such as realistic effects, bullets piercing through weaker materials, and many more. Call of Duty 2 was released on Microsoft Windows, Xbox 360, Pocket PCs, which were PC handheld devices, and surprisingly later to mobile, but we won't count that as a true port. But this game was more successful than its predecessor, selling 1.4 million copies in the first year, which is 1.8 times more than the 790,000 copies sold from the first game. Activision and Infinity Ward was happy with the game, and Activision wanted to increase the production of Call of Duty. So the publisher decided to acquire another team called Treyarch. This means that Treyarch was in charge of making the next Call of Duty game. Now, there's not much to talk about Call of Duty 3 because the fact is that the game was pretty mixed and debated to be worse than the first and second games, albeit this was Treyarch's first title, and they were probably getting used to making COD games for the first time. Call of Duty 3 was released in November of 2006 and was ported to PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, the original Xbox, Xbox 360, and the Wii. This game was not released for the PC, which was odd, but the game didn't really have much innovation besides better graphics and portability to older consoles. But the next game will be the blueprint of future Call of Duties.
Всякая война — вранье.
Ready? Hey, welcome to Infinity Ward. Come on in.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was going to be the biggest game yet. Instead of it being in a World War II setting, the game takes place in a 2010s-like world, with it being fictional with country superpowers going against each other. And the story introduced iconic characters into the game, who are John McTavish, who is commonly known as Soap, and a man that helps you named Price. You play as Soap in the SAS to stop superpowers of the world from corrupting and lying to the world. The story was amazing, and the multiplayer has improved dramatically, with Call of Duty introducing implementations that will stick to Call of Duty for the rest of the franchise, which are kill streaks, prestige grinding, and many more. A lot of YouTubers such as Blame Truth started uploading video gameplays of him playing COD 4.
SMGs, the main reason I'm using it.
Not only that, but the sniper scene was starting to also appear a bit. It wasn't as popular yet, but soon it will be. Call of Duty 4 was released on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Microsoft Windows, Mac OS X, and the Wii. The game sold around 17.8 million copies by 2013. It was hugely successful and loved by fans. Some people will say that this is their favorite Call of Duty game of all time, and I don't blame them. It's pretty good. Let's go on to the next title. The next year after Call of Duty 4, Treyarch decided to try again with the next Call of Duty title called World at War. And it was again a World War II shooter, but it was loved by many people and was an improvement to Call of Duty 3. The game had the usual campaign and the multiplayer, but if you completed the campaign for World at War, you'll be able to play a third mode hidden called Zombies. This mode was originally going to be scrapped by the higher-ups, but people over at Treyarch told them that the new game mode was fun and decided to trust Treyarch, because if they didn't, then the game mode would have been scrapped. But thankfully, it wasn't. And a whole new dedicated community to zombies were created, either to hide rounds, Easter eggs, or just casually shooting zombies. This version of zombies were pretty bare bones. It had the Pack-a-Punch, basic rounds, limited amount of guns, the ray gun, and limited perks, but the game was still fun. Later, the game eventually had custom zombies and allowed players to make their own zombie maps as long as if you're a PC player. The zombie maps that were available at the time were Knock Der Toten, Der Rise, Shinonuma, and Verrückt. Road at War sold more than 11 million copies by 2009, and this year was also when the sequel to Call of Duty 4 would be released, and it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Technically it was Call of Duty 6, but again, it doesn't matter. To the next one. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was even bigger and better than its predecessor title, with there being a sequel to Soap's story, except that you play as a new character named Roach, and they introduce a new iconic character named Ghost. You also play as a quiet protagonist named Private James Ramirez. The multiplayer side of the game was really insane, with the multiplayer never getting the patch it was supposed to be. It was scheduled to fix one-man army noob tubes and other balancing issues with the game, but regardless, the multiplayer had a fun and crazy twist to it, even if it was very unbalanced and the snipers were going crazy, to the point where Eclipse, Housecat, and Resistance makes a clan called FaZe Clan, and this clan will go on to be one of the biggest gaming team organizations of all time. Everyone wanted to be in FaZe, but unfortunately for the original 3 founders, a graphics designer named Temper stole the password of the FaZe Clan YouTube channel and changed it to lock the founders out due to an argument. Yeah, crazy. Modern Warfare 2 also had a new third mode called Spec Ops. These missions where the player plays in fast-paced missions and complete objectives to get the most amount of stars. Originally, this game mode was supposed to be a co-op mode, but Infinity Ward found that it wasn't going to work. So then Infinity Ward decided that Spec Ops should be the third mode for their own edition for their own Modern Warfare series. And that was it. Going on to the next game. In 2010, Treyarch decided to make their own COD series called Black Ops, starting with Black Ops 1. Treyarch added a lot of things to the game, such as campaign, which takes place during the Bay of Pigs invasion, and also has a new protagonist named Alex Mason, who is a CIA operative and works with a side character named Frank Woods. And these characters became one of the most iconic characters of the franchise. The game had multiplayer, and within multiplayer it had new maps and iconic ones such as Nuketown, Training Grounds, and more. The game also featured zombies, now as a main third mode without completing the campaign. You can jump straight into it. The zombies mode added more perks, more maps such as Kino, Moon, and others. They were more Easter eggs that people can discover around the map, or once again, just shoot zombies casually for fun. And with all of these additions, Black Ops 1 became the most selling COD title of all time, with a record of selling 30 million copies. And the year after Ops 1, it was Infinity Ward's turn to make a third sequel to Modern Warfare. But except they were going to gain help by a new studio acquired by Activision called Sledgehammer Games, and Raven Software working alongside them. With their help, they created campaign and multiplayer alongside with Spec Ops. The game was pretty mixed due to it being too identical to Modern Warfare 2, and no new groundbreaking innovations were added. But the game still sold well, with 23.6 million copies sold by 2013, only 2 years after its release. But then Treyarch cooks in the kitchen again with their title Black Ops 2, which is the sequel to Black Ops 1. And the story doesn't continue with Alex Mason, but instead with his son named David Mason, with his code name being Section in the Navy SEALs. The campaign for Black Ops 2 was finished clean in the oven, and the same can be said for the multiplayer. The mode was the most balanced it has ever been. Even if you play with troll type weapons, you can still dominate the match, and league play was added for competitive players. And zombies, on the other hand, was half and half. You see, the mode had 2 different design directors, with one of them making horrible zombie maps at first, such as Transit, Die Rise, while the other design director made one of the best zombie maps ever, such as Buried, Mob of the Dead, and Origins. The Zombies mode was a lot better due to these additions and were well received by players. The game was Call of Duty's peak, but also their last.
I will say is I personally think that Call of Duty Ghosts is the worst Call of Duty ever created, by far.
Whoa, wait. Hold on. We forgot one game, and it was a scrap game. It was called Call of Duty Future Warfare. Now, I don't know really what this game was supposed to be. I guess it was set in space, I guess. I don't really know. But if you guys haven't heard, like a few months ago, that we found out there was a scrap Call of Duty game called Future Warfare, and it was kind of popular. Unfortunately, you can't play it, unfortunately, because it was scrapped. But Neversoft made a Call of Duty title called, Future Warfare. The code name for it was NX1. And they had the campaign like close to done. It looks like it. And the multiplayer looks decent. Like, it reminds you of Modern Warfare, because I can see the user interface. It reminds you of that original Modern Warfare 2 kind of interface, if you see it. But that's just all I want to note. And this is it. Let's get back into talking about Ghosts, because, oh man. Yeah. Call of Duty Ghosts was released in 2013, with it being on newer consoles that were next gen at the time, which were the PlayStation 4 and the original Xbox One. The campaign by most were pretty lackluster due to it being a predictable story, and other complaints that players had were the graphics side of the game, which is the game not looking next gen at the time. And this was probably due to the developers having to optimize the game for 2 generations of consoles for it to be a cross-generation game, which was rare at the time. The game also took aspects from Battlefield's destructive environment, but it wasn't enough innovation to keep most players playing. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was when skill-based matchmaking was turned up a lot more, and Sledgehammer Games had to make a Call of Duty title on their own this time, and it was mixed between fans. Campaign was a mixed opinion on whether you liked it or not, and the multiplayer was not too keen for veteran players since this was the first Jetpack game in the franchise, and this one had the infamous pogo stick movement, which was clunky, but again, it was experimental. The game also had a new system called loot boxes. These were gambling systems where players can spin to unlock new blueprints of guns and other stuff. Many players were okay with it, but others didn't like it. There were also exo zombies, but we're just not gonna talk about it. Don't talk about it. Black Ops 3, on the other hand, was actually pretty good depending on who you are. If you're a zombies fan, you will love this game, especially if you are on a PC, where custom zombies was once again added to Black Ops 3 like it was at World at War. This time, it was even better, with modern graphics, modern gunplay, modern movement. It was basically classic Call of Duty zombies with a modern overhaul. However, the campaign was, well, let's just say it was out of order and hard to follow. And the multiplayer was decent. It did have cool weapon camos like Dark Matter, and it was very cool looking, I ain't gonna lie. The game had really cool color saturation that made the game look colorful. But the next game wasn't really loved by fans. Infinite Warfare is arguably one of the most disliked CODs of all time, with the trailer being one of the most disliked YouTube videos of all time. However, barely any COD players gave it a chance. It was a good experience and known by other COD players as an underrated Call of Duty title.
Public match. Every time you searched for a game and got into a lobby and the game was about to start, you would be hit with an error with the game stating that the level fast file is different from the server, aborting connection. And you would be in this loop infinitely where a game would never ever load.
Another World War II game was released by Call of Duty, and this one was made by Sledgehammer Games, and this time, yeah. The game was really buggy for the first few months of its lifespan. And remember guys, first impressions is everything. If Call of Duty players don't get their first impressions, they won't play the title either ever again or in the next few years. But the game didn't really get good until months later, and the game was decent. The campaign was okay, the multiplayer was just okay, and the zombies had a horror feeling to it since the atmosphere was heavily focused on back in the day type vibe and the zombie jump scares of the game. After Call of Duty World War II, Treyarch made Black Ops 4, which did not have campaign at all. It was just multiplayer, zombies, and a new mode called Blackout. This was a response to the Battle Royale era at the time, with Fortnite being in its prime in the OG seasons. And this overshadowed Black Ops 4's release, and the game was mixed. But then in 2019, a new side of Call of Duty emerged, and it was called Warzone. This made a lot of players to come back and grind the game. It was on par with Fortnite. But not only that, but Modern Warfare has been rebooted by Infinity Ward, and the game was a hit. But multiplayer has started to get very suspicious. Call of Duty Mobile was released in 2019 of October, and was well received by most players, and had all of the maps from the past Call of Duty titles onto one game, and the weapons as well. The game also have really insane looking cosmetics, but are insanely pricey or grind heavy. Vanguard was released after 2019, and the game was horrible. I don't think I have to talk about Vanguard until why it was horrible. The next game was Cold War by Treyarch, and it was bad on launch, but all the problems were fixed after its first lifespan. However, the skill-based matchmaking on that game was horrendous, but the zombies were just good and also too easy for a challenge compared to older Call of Duty Zombies titles. The campaign was decent, and the rebooted Modern Warfare Roman numeral 2 was released, and this game was sold well, but However, the game was so trash in terms of enjoyment. Infinity Ward took all of the good things about 2019, removed it for their quote-unquote vision, and made multiplayer fans aggravated with Infinity Ward. This is the worst Call of Duty title of all time, beating Vanguard somehow. And then the $70 DLC Modern Warfare Roman numeral 3 was released the year after it, and Sledgehammer has done a good job addressing bug issues at first until they were silent again until XDefiant made its way to the first-person shooter arcade genre and gave Call of Duty a competitor to strive to do better with their games, hopefully.
My thoughts on everything. And diving right in, you guys may have seen images like this one right here. This is the most common COD cycle, where essentially the main premise of this COD cycle is there's always hype for the upcoming Call of Duty game, hate for the current Call of Duty game, and then praise for the previous Call of Duty game, even though during that game's life cycle there was nothing but hate for that Call of Duty game. And usually the implication here talking about the COD cycle is that COD players are just mindless, hypocritical drones because they just follow this cycle year after year after year. But is this entirely the truth? Well, I would actually say yes and no. There's a lot more nuance to consider here.
I'm seeing the COD cycle right now in full effect. I'm seeing YouTubers out here talking about Vanguard, talking about how it was underrated. Vanguard was a great game, asking people if we took Vanguard for granted. They're doing it with Black Ops Cold War. I'm seeing people talking about Black Ops 4 lately and about how that was better than we thought it was back in the day. And I'm seeing some of these nerds out here, these Modern Warfare dudes fanboys, using this shit as ammunition to talk smack. Listen, the COD cycle is definitely a thing. There's people out here who don't know what they want, absolutely. There's people out here with huge channels that have no idea what they're talking about, man. They happen to put together entertaining videos.
Will Call of Duty ever recover, or will it stay the same? Only time will tell. It's been your boy Monix, and I'll see you guys later.